Hi, I'm Cindy O'Connor, sitting in for Mayor David Stahl, who was called out of town unexpectedly this morning. We had arranged for two very distinguished guests today, and Mayor Stahl wanted us to go ahead with this legislative summer update. So I'm very honored to welcome to the studio Assemblyman Patrick J. Diegnan, Jr. and Assemblyman Peter J. Barnes III. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to visit us today. June is a really busy month in the legislature, and I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about what's going on there now.
Well, this is budget time, so this is really where, you know, as they always say, on a campaign trail you can promise anything, but the real rubber hits the road when the budget gets produced, because that's where you set forth your priorities and your commitments. So we're in a real struggle situation right now. The governor has really basically line-itemed out in the past some programs which we as Democrats consider to be important. We have the real challenge this year to properly fund education as a result of the Supreme Court decision. So it's a really interesting time where the different philosophies are really basically going to be evidenced by what ultimately is included in the state budget.
How do you think it will play out?
My crystal ball is out at the cleaners. It's difficult. I mean, to give the governor his due, there isn't enough money to go around. On the flip side, there have been some decisions that the governor has made in terms of reduction on taxes of our highest earners in New Jersey, which I disagree with. East Brunswick is, in my mind, a poster child of the flaws in the governor's approach, because overall, during his 2 years in office, East Brunswick has lost close to $10 million in combined state aid between the rate on the surplus and the reduction in school and municipal aid. So that just isn't right. So I think we just have to try and start righting this ship.
What do you see as solutions?
Well, as you said, Cindy, June is a very, very busy month for a lot of reasons, not just the budget. The budget has to be adopted by June 30th by state law. And as a member of the Budget Committee last year, I'm not serving this year, but there's a process that begins when the governor makes his budget address, and then it goes to the Budget Committee in the Assembly, which I served last year, on which I served, and the Senate Committee. And there's a lot of things that go on between then and now. I see a lot of controversial issues, and I agree with my friend and colleague, Pat Diegnan. I see a lot of controversial issues. I think one of the issues is going to be whether or not any funding for school aid is restored. I think funding for state aid is going to be an issue. I also think funding for various women's issues is going to be a central issue, and it's one that's been really bandied about quite a bit the last 2 months. Right now, the papers, you read the morning papers, there's controversy, for lack of a better word. And the controversy will unfold that the governor has an idea of what the budget should be, the Senate has an idea of what the budget should be, and the Assembly also has its own ideas. In fact, Pat was just at a meeting yesterday where the Assembly Democrats weighed in on some of their ideas. So I think the budget this year is going to be somewhat controversial. And as of right now, you know, we have a few more weeks left, but as of right now, I don't think that we have a meeting of the minds from the three different groups that have to weigh in.
Can you elaborate on the women's issues that are on the table?
Well, last year the governor decided, this has become, you know, and I don't want this to become a political debate, but it has become a Republican philosophical position not to fund women's family planning clinics throughout all the states. Again, it's become a national crusade on their part, and the governor underfunded or reduced funding for family planning facilities in New Jersey by approximately $11 million, is it, I think, Pete?
It was 11 or 17. I thought it was around 17.
17, I'm sorry,
yeah.
$17 million.
Yeah.
Several efforts were made to override his veto, and he continued on each particular case. I mean, we're talking a infinitesimal amount of the state budget. So to say that that $17 million is a cost saving, it's a philosophical position on the governor's part, and we humbly disagree. Women should have the right to family planning. It's what, that decision has long ago been made. The days of women being kept barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen are over, and I think we as Democrats believe that this is just an outrage, and we're going to be certain that it once again gets restored in this year's budget.
Well, you have a record for supporting women through legislation like the MRI for women with breast cancer. Can you talk a little bit about some of the bills that you've
Well, there's the host of bills. That particular bill, my secretary was a high-risk cancer patient or potential cancer patient. Her mom took a drug when she was pregnant that led to cancer in infants. Then she subsequently took medications that also had a cancer risk. When she felt or was fearful that she had breast cancer, she could not get an MRI approved. She actually had to go and borrow $20,000 from her own pocket to pay for the MRI to discover that she did in fact have breast cancer. So I have a bill in, which sadly has not yet become law, to require that if someone is a designated high-risk cancer, breast cancer potential, that they would have the right to have an MRI paid for by their insurance carrier. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's this whole debate. I mean, it's really unbelievable to me that here in the year 2011 we're still debating women's issues. I mean, it would almost be like we're debating civil rights issues in this particular time. I thought this debate was long over, and it's just amazing to me that it's still continuing.
Mm-hmm. What other bills do you have in the works that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I'd like to talk about Patrick's bill, which I think is one of the most important bills that we're considering right now. It's Patrick's brainchild, and he's graciously allowed me to sign on as a co-sponsor. It's a bill that you mentioned a couple minutes before as we were discussing today's events, and that is the issue involving charter schools. The charter schools, the concept of charter schools, and Pat's the chairman of the Education Committee in the Assembly. But the issue of charter schools really has been an issue that's emerged over the last 15 years, I'd say 20 years, throughout the country. And as a lot of people in East Brunswick know, charter schools are really public schools that involve public funding. So if they're approved, it's not like a private school where the tuition is paid by the family or the student, but rather it diverts money away from the school budget. Patrick's bill, of which he's the prime sponsor, and also he originated the idea, is that before a charter school can be approved and before municipal money can be diverted, that the voters have to approve it in an election. So if the voters approve the charter school, it'll go through. If the voters do not approve it, then it won't. And I think Patrick should also talk a little bit about it, since again it's his bill, but it's one I'm very proud to be a co-sponsor of, and one that we believe in.
Can you start by explaining maybe what the legislature intended, what the hope was with charter schools, and how that's played out?
Well, charter schools are, without doubt, a potential solution in urban areas. And I am not an opponent of charter schools. I mean, if you have a circumstance like Newark, let's use a real life, they have the Robert Treat Academy, which is run by Steve Adebato. It is an incredible facility, and it gives hope and opportunity to folks that would not otherwise have hope and opportunity. And I'm sure that if the citizens of Newark were given the opportunity to vote on charter schools, they would support it. However, in a township like East Brunswick, or the borough of Highland Park, or believe it or not, the township of Princeton, there are efforts to establish charter schools in East Brunswick that's already started, or already in place, what are now referred to as boutique charter schools, Hebrew language charter school, Mandarin language charter schools, that are diverting in East Brunswick over $1 million a year from the public budget is being utilized or diverted for a school that isn't needed, and in my opinion, really not supported by the population. Let it be put on a ballot. Let the citizens vote. If they support it, all the better. If they do not, it should not be approved. To me, that's about as basic as you can get. And again, I was stunned, literally stunned, when the governor expressed his opposition to that premise. I don't even understand the logic behind it. In the areas where it's most needed, where they are most needed, clearly they're going to be supported. In the areas where they're not needed, clearly they're not going to be supported. How more basic can you get than that? So, you know, the bill, hopefully by the time this show airs, will have passed the Assembly. Our running mate, Barbara Buono, which we're very fortunate to run with, sponsoring similar companion legislation in the Senate. And it's my hope that we get this on the governor's desk before we adjourn, and hopefully he signs it.
Are there any other aspects to that bill, or is it very specific?
Pretty clean and unambiguous. And in Highland Park right now, there's really a huge dispute going on because there's a similar proposal. Highland Park only has 15,000 residents. To date, there have been over 3,000 folks that have signed a petition opposing it. Think about that, actually taking the effort to sign. Why in the world should public money be diverted towards a facility that simply isn't needed? East Brunswick, if you ask the average person in this area, tell me the best thing about East Brunswick, they'd say, the schools.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you said that in Highland Park, the schools. If you said that in Princeton, the schools. And they're diverting public money for boutique charter schools in those 3 municipalities, it's crazy.
Oh, speaking of the schools, one of the things that we've seen in the last couple of months is that the school's most valuable resource, really, I think, the teachers. Teachers are being laid off. What do you think the solution is going forward for funding the public schools? Again, I know it's a huge...
Well, this goes back to our first, what we're discussing right now. The state budget is a moral document. We have got to properly fund education. I do read, Pete does it too. We do read across America. You know, with the Dr. Seuss books, which I always joke are tough books to read, by the way. Every class I visited this year had 10 more kids in it than last year. Duty aides, teachers' assistants, all laid off. I have a friend who has 3 kids who are participating, not in this area, but in Warren County, in soccer. All 3 kids are being required to pay $350 apiece to play soccer at school. They now call it pay to play. This is crazy.
So where would the money come from?
I am an advocate of restoring the millionaire's tax, which would be a true millionaire's tax on income only over $1 million, not on up to $1 million. And that would generate approximately $1 billion extra dollars for the state budget, which coincidentally is just about what the shortfall is to fully fund education. So to me, it's a pretty simple solution. I don't know what Pete's position on that is.
I would probably agree. I think it's something. I think not only would I agree, but I think if the Assembly Democrats, as Pat and I have discussed, come forward with a budget, our own budget proposal to counter Governor Christie's, I think that might be one of the components of our suggestion.
Mm-hmm. As the chair of the Education Committee, I'm sure that you deal with a lot of the higher education issues. What are people talking about now? I mean, funding is a huge problem there also. Kids are being priced out of school. And this one predates Governor Christie. This includes Governor Corzine, I almost forgot his name for a second, Governor Corzine, and Governor McGreevy, how quickly we forget that. Governor McGreevy. We have not funded any capital improvements for our public colleges and universities for a decade. That's just crazy. There are, actually, former Governor Kane has proposed that on next year's ballot there'll be a public referendum to dedicate $2 billion towards enhancing our public schools and universities. You can't let them deteriorate. I mean, that's opportunity. That's the future. Mm-hmm. Mr. Barnes, you have some bills in the works. Can you talk about them a little? One
of the ones I'm working on right now, I haven't actually dropped a bill, but an issue I've been working on for quite a while deals with funding of legal services of New Jersey. In addition to the cuts for various women's programs and health clinics, another area that has faced a big shortfall is a group known as New Jersey Legal Services Corporation. Legal Services is an entity that has 7 different regions in New Jersey that provides free legal assistance to the poor in specific areas, and those areas primarily are landlord-tenant matters, foreclosures, some family law matters, Social Security disability claims, and other more esoteric claims. The Legal Services of New Jersey has lost millions of dollars both from budget cuts and other sources of funding which have dried up because of the recession. And one of the bills that I'm working on is trying to restore funding and also find a permanent source of funding through perhaps court filing fees that will provide a level source of funding in the future. We don't actually have a bill yet. I haven't